Hi, and welcome back to the RightNOW Podcast. My name is Derek Distin, Vice President of Community here at Rightworks. You know, we've talked about this a lot. The accounting profession, 7,000 years old. This is one of the oldest professions that humanity has. It has changed a lot. No doubt, if you took a bean counter, a literal bean counter from 7,000 years ago, transitioned them to today, they would be awed, not only at the technology, but the way that accounting has grown, the scope of what an accountant does. It is an evolving and ever-changing profession. Rightworks is here to support you through this, and we cannot do it alone. We rely on partners, we rely on vendors, we rely on subject matter experts and thought leaders to help us through this. Joining me today is Davis Bell, CEO of Canopy, to help provide some insight into what Canopy sees in the future of the profession. Davis, thanks for joining me.
Of course. Super glad to be here. It's fun, always fun to do it.
I love these podcasts. I love getting a chance to talk to people like this. I want to start off with, you and I spoke about a year ago, because we were doing the RightNOW podcast last year, heading into the RightNOW conference last year in Austin, Texas. We had a chance to sit down and have some discussions. Now, that was 12 months ago. The rate of change, the pace of change that could have been almost 7,000 years ago, I might say. I'm curious to know from your perspective, what has changed in the last 12 months for the industry as a whole? We'll get into Canopy specifically, but what has changed in the last 12 months?
It's such a great question, and I am having different answers come to mind, and I think maybe I'm going to give you a couple of different answers. So I think in one sense, everything has changed because of the emerging capabilities of artificial intelligence. In another sense, kind of nothing has changed, honestly, because there's a pretty massive difference between the availability of a technology and the adoption of that technology, right? And so you're seeing companies, the OpenAIs, the Googles, the Anthropics that are on the just absolute bleeding edge of these, large language models that they're developing, and to some extent the applications that are powered by those. But it's sort of still kind of this almost academic context, right? Where, people are releasing papers and they're testing these models against benchmarks, and the rate of progress is stunning. Now, in terms of what people in general and people in the industry are experiencing specifically, I think we're feeling that to some extent, right? Like we're seeing that we're putting AI across Canopy, and we're seeing how the improvement of these models is enabling us to create just a lot of value for customers. And certainly people are using some of these, the applications of these providers directly, and in other cases, tools that are powered by them. But that's like still pretty early, honestly, right? And I don't know that anyone could say, oh my gosh, like my life at an accounting firm is totally different and been upended in a good way or a bad way from 12 months ago. So I think, the curve of the capability is pretty insane. The curve of the adoption and the impact is not. That's sort of how I would think about it.
Yeah, I think we see the availability. We see the potential, and we're like, wow, that's going to change everything tomorrow. But you use the word adoption specifically. That is the truth. It's always going to lag behind. Something has to be available before you can try it. But it feels like we are running at a pace from the technology perspective of we're almost overwhelmed by the possibilities and the opportunities in front of us. I wonder, is there an element of, call it paralysis by analysis? Like, what do I need to do?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, well, number one, I think it's very difficult to just stay abreast of what's going on, right? I mean, this is sort of my job, right? And so I'm able to allocate a lot more time to it than your average person in an accounting firm. But even for me, it's a lot, right? It's a lot to track. And I subscribe to all kinds of newsletters and follow people on Twitter, and, I like LinkedIn. And so it's challenging to stay abreast of it. And when there's so much change, it's also difficult to know, hey, am I throwing in my lot with a given LLM? Am I throwing in my lot with, a given application? If I'm an engineer, am I going all in on Cursor, or is something else going to pop up that's going to be way better, right? And then I'm going to have to switch out and cancel subscription and get trained on it. So I think there is that element of the dust is far from settled. And so it can be tempting. I don't recommend it, but it can be tempting to just sort of say, like, I'm going to sit this out and I'm going to wait until the dust is settled. There's clear winners. It's obvious what applications are going to be useful, and I'm not going to worry about it until then. Again, not recommended, but understandable impulse.
I feel like if you were to say, I'm going to wait till the dust is settled, this is a constantly under construction zone, if you will.
Yeah.
Like, the dust is never going to settle
Sure.
on this stuff.
Yeah, I would agree.
So from your perspective then, what advice would you give to somebody who's sort of overwhelmed right now, trying to take in their options?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that, and this is not a personally distant question for me. I mean, it's easy to feel that. I've felt that. I think I would say, what you just said, which is that the option to just say, hey, like, let's let people duke it out. Like, let's think about like search engines back in like the early 2000s, right? It was like, people don't remember, but there were a lot of those things. Like, Google wasn't a verb, right? At that point, it was one of many. It certainly wasn't the first. And I think if you're like, I'm going to see where this goes for a couple of years, and then one will emerge, and, that'll be the one that I'll invest in if I, maybe I'm a marketer or whatever, I think that was fine. But I don't, and then Google became the default for 25 years. I don't think that's probably going to happen here. I just think that, like, the pace of change is not going to slow. So I think it's sort of like, you got to just deal with that reality. But then the other thing is, like, you don't have to do everything all, you don't have to boil the ocean here. It's like, if you're not doing anything, like, do the easiest thing, like get a $20 a month ChatGPT subscription and start messing around, right? Follow people who are, there are industry specific folks that are kind of tracking this from an industry specific lens that are really helpful. I follow them and they're great. And like, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, so I might not name names, but there's like a couple that are really great. And, just do a little bit every day. Like, that's what we're telling our teams. Like, you don't have to go root out every single piece of software you have. You don't have to, but like, you should be doing just a little bit. You should be poking around, talking to people, demoing tools, playing around, get a trial subscription, try the new thing. I mean, that's what's funny about these tools is, like, some of them are very specific, but some of them are pretty general. And these generalist, tools like a ChatGPT is obviously the most sort of notable one. I mean, it does a lot. It's not perfect, but like, try something that you might not, have thought that it could be good at, and maybe it'll fall on its face. But like, I'm trying to do that more and more, and it's pretty incredible. Like, it's a pretty major force multiplier for me now.
I will echo that, even from the use it for something that you may not be relevant to your job perspective. I coached cross country, middle school level. And as my fellow coach and I were discussing the other day, we were trying to come up with an adjustment to our practice plans for the summer based upon the fact that a couple of our days have switched from what we had last year. So I just dumped this all into ChatGPT and I said, hey, we're adjusting our days. Can you help me reformat this and add this, add in a zone 2 workout on Tuesdays instead of Thursdays? Seconds. I had the complete practice plan right there in front of me. Something that would have, even with the knowledge of what we were trying to do, taken me 30, 40 minutes just to get it all done.
And annoying, that well, I've started leaning out for annoying things, right? Like as an example, like I couldn't figure out something in my car. And it's like such a specific question, that like I could have called like the phone number, it would have been on. It's like, but it's like nobody would have known it if I'd like texted friends or whatever. So, I put in this very specific thing, like boom, right away. So there's a lot of that stuff professionally that I'm just trying to like, all right, what can I like, just imagine you just hired an assistant to deal with all the annoying stuff in your life. And there is that curve of like, oh, I got to like explain it to someone else. But like, man, 30 minutes of redoing a timetable for a cross country team versus like right away, it's pretty miraculous.
And the best part is that you don't have to rehire a different person when somebody's life circumstances change and they have to depart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where I think that's the frame we're using for AI right now is just what's annoying in the life of people in an accounting firm. Like, what do they not want to do, right? Because honestly, humans are really good at strategic things. I mean, you can always augment those capabilities, but to us, the big question is like, where's just the wasted effort and time? Like that doesn't create value for the customer, the client, I should say. It doesn't create value. There's no enjoyment or fulfillment on the part of the person who's doing it. Like, let's just get rid of that stuff, right? Like nobody wants to right click on PDFs and rename them over and over again. Like nobody wants to do that. Nobody became a CPA to do that. So let's just not have them do that.
So you said we are thinking about this from that lens. Are you talking specifically about Canopy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's our number one frame is, depending on who you ask and what you believe, roughly 2/3 of the time in an accounting firm is non-billable. So, and non-enjoyable, right? There's a correlation there. So it's like, let's just remove that, right? And then you think about how cool that will be, where if you gave people 1/3 of their time back to do high value add strategic stuff, and the ripple effect of that on clients and their businesses and their lives, like it's pretty incredible. Like you imagine, a 10-person company that could suddenly get the kind of tax advice that was previously only attainable for a 500-person company, right? I mean, that would be really, really meaningful and really, really cool for everybody. So that's what, let's take them out. Like, you don't need to bug, we don't need to have highly trained people bugging their clients for, their information over and over again, or sending an invoice. Like, that's silly. Like, why would we do that? And that's really to distill it all down. That's what we're focused on within Canopy as it relates to AI.
So speaking of Canopy then, what has changed for you guys in the last 12 months?
So a couple of different answers. So we raised $70 million, which, is a lot of money. And the funding environment is such right now that you're not seeing those rounds get done anymore. In 21, it was like every day, but you're just not seeing rounds like that get announced anymore. And so that's the big change. Funding is a means to an end, right? Like, customers don't care about how much money you've raised, but they should care, simply because it means that we are investing so heavily in our platform. Nobody in the industry is investing in their platform in the way that we are. And that investment is really primarily around AI, right? And people think that's like a buzzword, and it is, but it's not. Like, we're not investing in kind of like AI toys or novelties. It's just basically automating a bunch of the stuff that people don't want to do, they're not good at, and doesn't create value for clients. So that's like the big change, I would say, for us. And as a result of that, we've hired tons and tons of people, and we're just shipping super, super cool stuff, every week.
Talk to me about some of the super cool stuff. What's the most exciting thing for you that has either recently been shipped, or perhaps, if you can peel back the curtain a little bit, is pretty close to being shipped?
Yeah, I think the thing that like got shipped recently is, I guess it's in beta, I think. But this sort of document classification tool, right? So rather than, you get a big, massive sort of upload of customer documents, and they're, totally random names, and, you got to download them, right click, rename per the naming convention of the firm, put in the right folder, that can just now happen, auto magically, right? That is like so cool, and it feels like a small thing, but it's not. it is a really sort of massive deal in terms of like the day-to-day experience of the people at those firms. So that's like, we're very, very, very excited about that. And then in terms of what's coming, I'm looking up. Sometimes I get in trouble here when
careful on what you're allowed to speak.
Talk about these things. But I think if you just can imagine, the broad conceptual frame here is all the things that people go to do in Canopy that, Canopy makes it way easier. It's systematized. There's, alignment and clarity and transparency, between colleagues in a firm, will increasingly just be done by Canopy. So to be clear, not the actual work of accounting. We don't do that, right? You're still going to put your accountant hat on and do that accounting work. But as far as the things you're going into Canopy to do, that's just going to be increasingly automated, right? So, and some of it's going to be a little bit more traditional software thing, like subtask checklists or, document checklists, these, a new mobile UX, those kinds of things that are going to be super cool. But kind of moving forward, about 90% of it is just going to be, a human used to have to do this. How can we make it so they don't, right? How can we make it, as an example, rather than a human being like, wow, the first Monday of every month, I got to go look at my WIP, and then I got to go send, I'm going to download an invoice and then send it. And then I'll try to notice if they responded with payment or not. Just like, that's just gone. That's just over. You're not doing that anymore. You're not spending your time on that. So there's a million examples of things like that people were having to do in Canopy that now Canopy will just do for them.
Automating out the annoying.
Yeah,
to tie it
exactly.
all together.
Yeah, exactly. I might steal that.
No, feel free. I have no stance on no hold on that. Automating out the annoying. There you go. So you talked about the ability for Canopy to help you with alignment, clarification, and transparency on the non-accountant related work. If I am a practitioner, let's call me a decision maker, right? I'm either a founder, partner. I'm trying to think of how I want to phrase this. I'm either a principal, a partner, a founder at a firm. What should I be looking at from a KPI perspective? Am I making a difference by let's use Canopy, because you're certainly an expert here. I adopt Canopy. What should I be tracking to say we're on the right path?
In terms of their adoption of Canopy, or just more broadly, like as a firm?
All of the above, but I think really in the end, what we're looking for is more broadly as a firm that they're on the right path.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are probably a couple of things I might mention. I think staff morale and retention is sort of the canary in the coal mine. Like, that will tell you, I think, most things you need to know, honestly, because I think if you're losing staff, people are leaving, or they're just, very unhappy, And there's easy ways to, gauge that. You can obviously do it qualitatively just in conversations, but I like to measure it. We do an employee net promoter score here at Canopy once a quarter. Um, I'd be hard pressed to come up with a better metric that would actually tell you about the health of the business, right? Like the profitability, the happiness of your customers. Like it just all kind of stems from that. So I think, from there, I think some of just the standard things around, profitability per employee per head, right? That's a really meaningful one. Profitability per customer. I think we know accountants are a helpful group. They often get stuck serving customers that don't pencil, right? And that, everybody thinks they're the most important customer, and the person who does a $500 tax return every year thinks that you ought to be, moving the sun, earth, moon, and stars for them. So I think, and maybe just like a broader one, which is, it's kind of interesting because I talk to a lot of our customers, and sometimes, I can tell that maybe they haven't fully worked out what they're after from their firm. And so there are some people that are like, let's go. I want to go acquire 20 firms. I'm building an empire. Great. Right. And then there are some folks that are like, if I'm being totally honest, like, I don't even want more customers. I don't even want more revenue. I just want to see my family between January and April. Right. And so, which there's no right answer or wrong answer, I should say. They're all right answers to that question. But I think thinking that through, and then you can build the metrics around it, right? Like if you're the former person's like, I actually just want the same amount of revenue, I just want to work a little bit less, then, track your hours, right? And watch your revenue, make sure it doesn't tip. So the answer to that question, which is a good one, is a little bit like, what are you after in life? And has this firm support that, instead of just, getting in the rigid sort of, rut of, I got to do everything that my clients ask.
Yeah. Almost a know thyself kind of principle. Like, exactly. What are you looking for? What is your firm really looking for?
Exactly.
I love that you guys do an ENPS. We do an ENPS as well. And for anybody listening, here's a plug. If you're not doing some sort of employee net promoter score, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm happy to talk about this stuff all day long.
Yeah, it's very important and very revealing. It can be a little painful sometimes. I'm not going to lie. You go through those surveys, and it's hard not to get defensive or frustrated, but there's a lot of gold in there.
Yeah. For the rest of 2025, what are you most excited to talk to firms about? What problems are you excited to try and tackle?
Yeah, I think in general, we have this, phrase around here, like help accountants build the firm of their dreams, right? And everybody has pieces of their job that they love, and everybody has pieces of their job that they hate. And we just simply want to remove the stuff they hate, right? And software has always helped us do that, but AI has just created this insane opportunity to do that in a really, really, really impactful way. And so I love talking to, that's actually the first question I usually ask when I talk to a customer. It's like, what's the worst part of your day? Like, what do you dread, right? Like when you're coming in that morning, you're on your drive in and you're like, oh, I know this, I got to do this thing. And interestingly, it's almost always the same answer, which is, I hate chasing people for stuff. Like I really, really, really hate that. So that's what we're focused on, is making it so people don't have to chase people for stuff, and just kind of taking the human out of that loop, except for in a very supervisory kind of, monitoring kind of way. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited to help just the industry progress and kind of deal with, technology present. I mean, it's like threat and opportunity, right? Like it's a double-edged sword. There's no denying that. And we want to turn it into an opportunity. And we think we can. So that's what's really exciting. And the impact of that is exciting to me. I mentioned it, but like, the cost of these services has been pretty high because a lot of the time is allocated to low value add things. So if we can extend the services that these people provide to more small businesses and more individuals, I mean, people don't usually have like a CPA do their taxes till their 30s, 40, and then even then, yeah, and then right, and it's like people leave a lot of money on the table, and businesses do, and so I think just like there's a massive like economic benefit, societal benefit to freeing up accountants to go and do accounting as opposed to all the other stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting the opportunities that are present. You mentioned opportunities, you mentioned threats as well. Like we view technology with a skeptical lens sometimes. Like, oh, is this going to replace my job? Is this going to be difficult for me to learn? I think the people who thrive and excel the most are those who view it as the opportunity. Like you said, I want to spend more time with my kids. How can I remove 2 hours out of my day of chasing people? You mentioned you like to ask the question of clients and firms that you go and visit, what's the thing that you dread the most? So I'm going to turn that around on you, Davis. You get up, you're getting ready for the day. What's the thing you dread the most?
I dread email probably the most. Like I get insane amounts of emails, just unsolicited kind of, and I've got all the filters, but like, man, people are creative and they get around them. And so I just sort of like going through that, and I've used various tools and some of them are better than others, but just like there's an inbox with 100 emails and knowing that like 2 of them are valuable and figuring out how to filter that out and spending the time on that. It just feels like really wasted time.
Yeah. It is. It's the annoying, right? How do you get around the annoying on that?
Yeah.
Crystal ball. What do you see forthcoming for the profession in the next 12 months?
Yeah, I think that like the capability curve of AI is going to continue to just look very steep.
It's almost vertical at this point.
Yeah,
how much more vertical can it get?
Exactly. It's not much of a curve, right? It's more of just a straight line up. But I think we'll see the adoption curve steepen quite a bit. I think that people part of it is on the technology companies to turn just this broad technology of AI into useful applications. So that's like what we're doing. But I think it will become the value that you'll be leaving on the table by not adopting those will start to become such that it will overwhelm the obstacles that we throw in the way of change, right? Of like, I don't want to figure this out, and it's going to take me some time, and it's going to disrupt our workflows, and it might involve our customers who are sick of getting, having a new login to this new tool or whatever. I just think it'll just start to become, it's like, I'm trying to think of a good metaphor, but it's like, I mean, if you think about, a lawnmower that, had a slightly, one faster gear, you're like, okay, I like whatever, like that, it'll save me 3 minutes a week or whatever. But I think this will start to be the equivalent of like just those robotic lawnmowers that just do it, right? And then it's like, okay, maybe kind of expensive, but like that's like hundreds of hours a week, right? And harder for me to ignore, or I should say a year. But yeah, you get the point.
Yep. Driving to a track meet over the weekend, and my daughter and I are in rural Georgia, and we passed a yard that had one of the robotic mowers out.
Yeah.
And she looks at that and she goes, "Dad, what is that?" Well, it's a robot lawnmower. She goes, "Like a Roomba?" I said, "Exactly like a Roomba." Which I then started thinking, I started thinking to myself, I'm like, I got to get home and mow the lawn. Boy, it would be great if that was done before I even got there.
I know. It's crazy. Although they don't leave the nice lines, which is one criticism. But I think that's probably a decent analogy of like, hey, lighter lawnmower, sharper blade, extra gear, but you're still mowing the lawn, versus like, wow, I was at the track meet and I came home and my lawn was mowed. Like I didn't have to do anything. And then I'm going to go check and just make sure they did a good job. But like, that's where we're trying to take Canopy.
So last year when we talked, and you've touched on this a couple of times, I asked you the question of, hey, if you could ask yourself 10 years from now a piece of advice, what would it be? Your response was, I would want to know what the AI capability curve looked like. Now, I think we both just agreed it's probably even more straight up than we would have imagined 12 months ago. But specifically, you mentioned something along the way about likening it to the internet curve. So we'll talk mid 90s through mid 2000s. You said there's a lot of chaff that came with that, like the fun, unique sort of nonsense versus the technology behind it. In the AI world, is there anything that you see right now that is kind of, oh, that's neat? I don't really think it's going to impact us.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a ton of it. It's the challenge is like knowing what is what, right? Like, you know, there are, I mean, a million companies, right? And lots of, I mean, you know, we kind of live in the startup world, and it's like there are a lot of startups that just do the same thing they did. They just put AI on the website because it, you know, helps with sales and might help them to raise some money. But I am trying also to be very open-minded, because I think the thing that people do, it's like, well, it's like, you know, not there yet. It hallucinates or it makes mistakes, or, you know, so it's like this sucks and I'm not going to use it, kind of a thing. So I'm trying to not be that person, because I think that's a really big mistake. But I'm skeptical around some of the social applications of this stuff, or maybe I'm more worried than skeptical, but
cynical.
You know, yeah, like these, you know, the AI, you know, girlfriend boyfriend thing. You know, I'm like, like maybe it catches on, but I don't know that I see that as a net positive for society. Like character.ai and like, I don't know, like I'm skeptical that it'll have a positive impact. Maybe it will have an impact. But I think I'm a pretty wide-eyed optimist as it relates to anything around its, you know, functional ability, right? Like anything that saves humans time, I think it's gonna get pretty nuts. And I think we can acknowledge like that is going to come with some soul searching around, you know, like, you know, who am I if I don't have to right click PDFs all day? Like, where does my where can I create value if I'm not doing that? But I think net it'll be beneficial, because, you know, if that's a lot of what you did, then you could go figure out something that's going to be a lot more valuable and enjoyable and sort of, you know, even like affirming as a human, right? We want to be useful, and I think that like this will help us be more useful to one another.
I sure hope so. I have my own cynical views on some of the AI technology, specifically around raising 3 teenage kids right now. And the idea of companions and AIs to answer questions. I mean, it's
Well, I'll give you an example. So I have a 10-year-old, he's a 4th grader, and he's very entrepreneurial minded. And so he wanted to like start a little company to sell some t-shirts to his friends. And so I was like, well, let's just ask ChatGPT a bunch of questions, have it build a business plan. And I was so conflicted, because on the one hand, it was sort of like just doing a bunch of stuff that I don't know that he'll know how to do because it was done for him. But on the other hand, it's like, I mean, why would I have him do that? Like, what, you know, why? And then he can focus on the things that ChatGPT cannot do. And so it's a real, you know, being a teacher is a tough job right now. I think being a parent is a tough job right now, because, you know, in his other world, he's learning like long division. And I'm sort of like, you're never going to have to do long division. Like you haven't needed to do that for a long time. We've had calculators for a long time, but knowing the concept behind it, I think is pretty helpful. So I think it's like this really tough balance of like, what do you make sure they understand conceptually, but without making them just do a bunch of stuff that now a really powerful tool can do for them.
That hits home because Thursday of last week, my 12-year-old 6th grade son came home almost in tears. He had not done well on a math quiz. It turns out he didn't understand solving for a variable, right? X plus 5 equals 9. What is X? He had spent the last 3 weeks listening to his teacher try to teach these things. For some reason, he didn't grasp it. Maybe he wasn't paying attention. I don't know. He's in tears. He got a 1 out of 20 on a quiz. And this is a kid who's got pretty much straight A's in all of his other classes. And we sat down. I started trying to explain it to him, and he literally looks at me. He goes, "Dad, I just want to put this in ChatGPT." Dude, I get it. However, you need to understand this, what you're trying to do. It turns out he never really associated what X was.
Sure.
To him, it was like, well, why is there a letter in this string of numbers?
Right.
Saying to him, it just represents something you don't know. And then walking him through that for a little bit, all of a sudden the light bulb went off. And he took a quiz yesterday, came home. He's like, "Dad, I got 20 out of 20. I was like,
awesome.
That's awesome, buddy. You're exactly right, though. I don't expect you to have to then take, and if it's polynomials and fractions and all these other things, like, dude, that stuff you can enter into the calculator as long as you get what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah. And that's where it's really tough with this stuff with kids, right? I think as adults, it's like a no-brainer. It's like, I don't need to go try to remember how to like build this Excel formula. I'm just going to literally ask ChatGPT and like, we're off to the races.
Yeah. Yep. It's a different world, and we are living through what our parents probably lived through with the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. Although I think, I would agree. I think the impact is going to be, orders of magnitude larger, but I think, similar, probably emotional sort of, experience. But I think we're going to have to go back further than that for a comparably impactful technology.
Farming. Accounting. When accounting first came on the scene 7,000 years ago. There you go.
Right. Blowing people's minds with the bean counting.
So as we wrap up, I'm going to ask you the same 2 questions that I asked you last year. Number 1, if you could go back in time 10 years and give yourself one piece of advice in 60 seconds or less, what piece of advice would you give yourself 10 years ago?
Whew, that is so hard. I think I might now just say, figure out some very high-level strategic skills that you want to specialize in. Like, what do you want to be really, really deep into and really, really good at? Because I think that, we're as we automate a lot of stuff away, I think just specialization at a high level strategic order is going to be really important. So I think that's like having a skill. In your case, it's like building a community. That's going to be that's a valuable skill, and it's complex and it's strategic. And so I think unfortunately accountants have that, right? Like I think it's very strategic and very high order, and isn't just people say just ask. I mean, I think we're a long ways away from, machines being able to do that stuff. So that'd be my advice.
Flipping that around, if you could go forward in time 10 years.
Yeah.
And ask yourself one question.
Sure.
And I am going to give you the monkey wrench. You can't ask yourself the question about AI and what the curve looks like. What would you ask yourself?
Yeah, man. Because that is the one that I would like. I mean, maybe I'll cheat and ask not the capability curve, but ask about the adoption curve, right? Because I mean, people are so fixated on the capability curve, but I went to the doctor the other day and they handed me a clipboard with a drawing of a human body, and then they told me to circle where it hurts with a pencil. So we've had the capability of having a much better experience than that for many decades, right? And you can imagine then the process, like they take this piece of paper, they hand it to the doctor's like, oh, okay, his elbow hurts. And then it's like, go put that in a file cabinet. I don't know what did they, go shred it for HIPAA. Like, I don't know, but it's not a very streamlined, efficient process, right? So we've had the capability of doing a lot better than that for many, many decades. So I'm curious to know how the adoption of what has become capable, will actually look like. That's going to be really interesting to me.
It's going to be an iPad with a drawing that you're just supposed to touch the spots instead of circling with pencil.
Well, yeah, but like I follow a bunch of folks in AI, and a couple of them have really great charts about comparing this to former, other technological innovations that emerged. And I mean, the penetration of just cloud software in what they call the enterprise, so these are very large customers, is like 50%. Like in 2025, if you went rooting around, if you just walked into a largish corporation, you went rooting around, there are server closets in that place. And there are people with screwdrivers that go in to update software with CD-ROM. So, and again, we've had the capability to be beyond that for quite some time.
Yeah. Change is hard.
It is hard. It takes a while.
Yeah, it takes a while. It's also inevitable, though. I mean, if you're not changing, then you're literally dying on the vine at that point.
For sure.
Well, just a heads up, the next time that we talk, I'll probably ask you these questions again. And now you have removed the AI capability curve.
I'm going to have to think of a totally new framework here.
There's something for you to think about as you're driving into work or whatever. What do I want to ask myself 10 years from now? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to do that instead of dreading the emails that I'm going to have to respond to.
There you go. I've given you one day's reprieve at some point.
Yes.
Well, Davis, I appreciate your time. And to you, dear listener, I appreciate you tuning in again for this episode. Keep aligning, keep clarifying, keep creating transparency with your firms. Most of all, keep building the firm of your dreams. We appreciate you listening. Davis, thank you again so much.
Thanks for having me. Always a good time. Appreciate it.
Love it.